Hello and welcome. Coronavirus, or SARS-CoV-2 as we know it, has no cure. Now, you would know that if you believed all the WhatsApp messages that you've been getting over the last 1 year, which have been promising some kind of cure, if not fairly significant treatment in the last year or so. But would you be somewhat shocked or surprised to learn that many of these messages or communication actually came in the form of regular advertisements that you saw in newspapers or maybe other forms of digital media consumption, where brands from companies that are well known or very well known in some cases actually promising in some ways to help you fight coronavirus or COVID-19 and or cure you even indirectly. The Advertising Standards Council of India did a study and picked up 332 advertisements for scrutiny through complaints and their own monitoring, and found that only 12 in the last year could substantiate that they had any benefit to offer in the context of COVID-19. Now, the products are interesting in themselves. They range from paints, air conditioners, apparel, detergents, water purifiers, skincare, and even plywood and laminates. So you can imagine the nature of misinformation, if you want to call it that, that you've been facing, and perhaps as we are now aware through anecdotal, if not otherwise evidence, looking back, have believed and maybe acted upon. So to understand how the Advertising Standards Council of India has approached this challenge and what they've done about it, and how they are trying to keep you safe from being bombarded with messages which are clearly false or unable to stand up to scientific scrutiny, I'm joined by Manisha Kapoor, Secretary General of the Advertising Standards Council of India. Manisha is a marketeer herself and has worked with big brands like Levers and J&J in the past. Manisha, thank you very much for joining us. So walk us through what the report broadly found, and how do you compare the degree of, let's say, false claims, if I can call it that, in this space to any other space that you normally deal with?
Hi. This is based on the analysis of the advertisements that we scrutinized over the last financial year. And as you said yourself, some of these are complaints, some of these are ads that we picked up through our own monitoring service. And certainly it was an exceptional year in the sense that, healthcare claims and, of course, claims on germ protection, on brands promising direct protection from COVID, helping to build your immunity, all of those kind of claims really was something that we saw in a different shade last year. Not only did we see an increased number of such claims, but I think also the sensitivity of the scrutiny was higher. So something which was, let's say, an anti-germ claim in the past, when you now make in this context an anti-germ claim, ASCI was keen to see whether it actually gives you any protection against the coronavirus, because that's the first impression that consumers might have of such a claim. Or when you say antivirus, in the past you may have given protection against a virus which causes, a regular flu
Common.
or a regular cold. Yeah. But, when you say today it's antiviral, consumers would assume that it has some benefit against the current, prevalent virus and what we are all talking of. So I think, like I said, there were certainly more number of claims in this area, but also ASCII scrutiny and standard of evidence that we needed. We definitely kind of raised that standard as
Yeah.
well.
Right. And to walk us through the process as well. What happens? I mean, when do you suppose, let's say you are monitoring advertisements as you do on a daily basis. How do you pick it up? What happens then? You write to the company, I'm assuming. How do they respond? Do they respond?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, so we receive consumer complaints as well on a daily basis. So we could receive intra-industry complaints, and we also have our own national advertising monitoring system called TAM, which monitors over 500 TV channels, over 800 publications, over 3,000 digital websites and platforms on a daily basis. So we pick up ads ourselves, that we find could be in potential violation of the ASCII code. What happens is that when we pick up an ad or we receive a complaint, we would write to the advertiser asking them for substantiation of their claims. And they would typically, in cases like this, especially where there is technical substantiation to be given, they would respond with their point of view, but also with their technical data. So lab test reports, maybe clinical trials, in vitro studies, consumer studies, etc. We have a panel of experts. In fact, we have experts in over 25 disciplines, ranging from microbiology to market research to chemical and formulations, to Ayurveda, etc. And of course, a lot of them were kept very busy last year examining and scrutinizing these claims that came in. Once we scrutinize the evidence, it is taken to the Consumer Complaints Council, which will then deliberate on the matter depending on the evidence that has come in, the advice from the expert, as well as, of course, seeing what the nature of complaint and the advertisement is. And then we kind of, deliberate on that and give our recommendation whether we believe that, that piece of advertisement is in violation of the ASCI code, which means that it could be misleading or it's harmful or, any other kind of violation of the code.
Right. And do you have, I'm assuming you do, representatives from the medical profession, including, let's say, maybe pulmonologists or virologists and so on?
Yes, so we have medical doctors as well on our panel. We have microbiologists who examined a lot of the data that came in on COVID. So yes, so we have experts across a lot of disciplines who would look at this data, depending on the nature of evidence provided, and really determine whether the evidence was sufficient to justify the claim that was made in the advertisement. I mean, sometimes the evidence could support certain kind of claims, but was that the kind of claim that was made in the advertisement? Was there an overclaim? So those are the kind of issues that would be examined.
And could you give me an example of that?
So just to give, so for example, I mean, if you were to take, let me take the example of paints or ACs, right? I mean, which were categories that we saw, which, while they do operate in the space of clean air or, providing, in a sense of hygiene at home, but for them to make the claims on protecting or giving the impression in their ads that they could protect from the current situation, we needed these devices not only to be antiviral themselves, in the sense that, let's say a particle which touches the wall may kind of be negated by the technology they use, but for people in that room, I mean, did it reduce the viral load in the room that you were there? And finally, I mean, these products are used in the home for people. Let me give you an example of a fan, and examples where the surface of the fan, if there was a virus which came in contact with the surface of the fan, that virus, so they did have technology which could kind of eliminate that virus. But what did it mean for the people in the room? And did it reduce, therefore, the viral load of the SARS-CoV-2 virus in the room that people were breathing? And did it make a material difference there? So that was the nature of examination, that we saw, and where it was merely that the surface of the product itself could remain viral free, versus not giving protection to people, especially in products where people would expect it.
Right.
If I switch on a fan or an AC, that the viral load in the room would reduce. So in most cases, we were able to, not find sufficient evidence in these cases.
And when you reach out to these companies with these questions, do they respond swiftly? Do they drag their feet? What's your experience, and particularly in this context?
No, they do respond swiftly. We give them a certain number of days to respond, and unless, of course, there are very genuine circumstances, where they feel that they cannot respond in the time that they've given, and then we negotiate for, therefore what's a reasonable time. But in most cases, I would say in more than 95% of cases, we do get the response in the time that we've allocated. Right. And like I said, in most cases, it's not like they have no evidence, but in many cases, the evidence and the claim that they are making is not in sync. So they may have some evidence, but the way the claim is framed could mislead consumers.
Right. And what's the time frame? So let's say, a claim comes in on day one to you, and the time between you're able to process it, share it with your committee, they come back with, let's say, a negative, and then you send that judgment or back to the company. And how do they respond, and how much time usually passes?
So it usually takes between 2 to 6 weeks, depending on just how much evidence they provide, how much back and forth happens on that evidence. So in some cases, when we write to the companies, they immediately withdraw the claim. I mean, in many cases, they will say, okay, we understand that this may be an overstatement, and they immediately withdraw. So in a sense, that's the swiftest in-market remedy, right? But where the case has to be formally investigated, where evidence is provided, the experts have to go through it, it goes through council, the minutes of the meeting are this thing. It could take between then 4 and 6 weeks in those cases. but less
Right.
than 10 days in case the company immediately kind of withdraws.
Right, and we've seen some fairly outlandish claims, including in alternate medicine in the last year. Now, if I were to, ask you to put on your marketer's hat, what's the time? How if there is an advertisement and it's there in in front page or some other pages of dailies, there's a big campaign running. Assuming the brand in question pulls it, even within, let's say, 3 days or 5 days, is there any real impact of subsequently withdrawing it and so on? I mean, I'm trying to ask you a question beyond ASCII.
Yeah, no, I think there is an impact, because one is that they cannot use that advertisement again, and I think in any kind of monitoring system or a self-regulation system, there will be cases of hit and run, and there will be advertisers who maybe are not as scrupulous. But I would say that in most cases, advertisers do take this seriously. They do withdraw the ad, they do modify the ad, and yes, I mean, while it is out there in the public domain, yes, I mean, there is some damage done. But I think this makes them careful about doing a similar ad the following time. So over a period of time, there is a cumulative effect to these things. And at the end of the day, I think as a marketer, if I have put in a lot of effort in creating a campaign, it's a huge disruption if I have to pull it off. It's a disruption in my marketing plans. If I have to withdraw it or modify the claim, it is a lot of resource spent.
Right.
So I would say that even withdrawing or modifying the ad after, even after it's run for a little bit, I would say is a fair disruption, and therefore I would not think that advertisers would take that lightly.
Okay, if it's assuming the advertiser has some sense of integrity and place in society and so on. Okay, so as we look ahead, COVID-19 is still with us, and we are still obviously nowhere near finding a cure, though we have treatments for it, and of course we have a vaccine. So, what would you say, in your mind, is the role of media platforms, intermediaries who disseminate these advertisements? Could they be doing more, and how could they be, if so?
Yeah, I think one of the things that ASCII has believed right from the beginning is that it is the advertising ecosystem that must come together, and not just the advertiser or the advertising agencies. So media broadcasters are an essential part of that ecosystem, and in fact, through the Cable and Television Network Act, any ad that violates an ASCII guideline, cannot legally be shown on television. So there is both a moral and a legal obligation for media platforms to be more careful. And I certainly see a big role for media on this, and I think either using the principles that ASCII has laid down or certain internal guidelines that they have. I think this is a time where all of us have to step up, and have to be more responsible. It is, not something which is about a short-term business gain. This is really about saving lives, and not being irresponsible about that. So I think, everyone. I mean, as right from a common citizen to a business owner, to an advertiser to a media owner, I think everyone has to step up in this circumstance.
Right, Manisha Kapoor, Secretary General of the Advertising Standards Council of India. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.